HFY story. The day the stars watched back. The Vorrakai fleet drifted through the void like a wall of steel. Dozens of massive warships, each larger than a city, cast their shadows against the stars. The Vorrakai were not explorers, not scientists, not dreamers. They were conquerors, an empire built on the ashes of 100 worlds. Their arrival was never a matter of negotiation, only of submission. To them, Earth was just another mark on their endless campaign across the galaxy. From their perspective, humanity was young, barely scratching at the mysteries of space with fragile satellites and primitive rockets. They expected to find a fractured world, divided by borders, leaders too busy fighting among themselves to unite against an enemy from the stars. The Vorrakai commander, High Warlord Krethar, stood at the bridge of the flagship Blood Fang. His reptilian eyes scanned the holographic projection of Earth. Blue oceans, green continents, thin atmosphere. It was, by all accounts, a perfect planet. Soft, Krethar growled. Too soft. They will fall within a cycle. The bridge crew hissed in agreement. Vorrakai culture admired strength above all else. Mercy was weakness. Unity was a tool for control, not survival. The idea that a divided, fragile race like humans could resist them was laughable. Already, Vorrakai scouts had surveyed Earth's defenses, a handful of nuclear weapons, primitive aircraft, and scattered armies. Their report described humans as technologically irrelevant and psychologically unstable. "Then we strike at once?" asked General Morvac, Krethar's second-in-command. Krethar shook his massive head slowly. "No. We make them kneel. They will understand their insignificance before we burn their world. Begin with orbit strikes. Target their communications, their satellites, their military centers. Let them know they are prey." The order was given. Moments later, brilliant spears of plasma fell from orbit. Human satellites shattered in silence, burning up in the atmosphere like dying stars. In cities across the globe, the skies lit with fire as power grids collapsed, communication lines went dark, and panic spread. For the first time in history, humanity looked up and saw death waiting above the clouds. The first days. In Washington, London, Moscow, Beijing, every capital across the globe, leaders scrambled to respond. There was no time for politics, no time for borders. The Vorrakai weren't interested in treaties. Their message was simple: submit or die. But humanity didn't submit. On the second day of the invasion, a joint message was broadcast from an underground facility, patched together by the few remaining satellites and relays. It was shaky, but it carried across the planet. "This is Earth. We are under attack by a hostile alien force. All nations must unite. This is not about territory, politics, or religion. This is about survival. Stand together. Fight back." For the first time in centuries, the world truly became one. Alien eyes on humanity. From orbit, the Vorrakai observed with cold amusement. They expected chaos. They expected humans to fracture, to turn on each other in desperation. After all, that was what every other conquered species had done. Fear drove division. Division led to collapse. But something strange happened. Instead of tearing apart, humans came together. In Africa, rival tribes shared food and shelter as Vorrakai plasma fire scorched their lands. In the Middle East, sworn enemies fought side by side in the ruins of their cities. In Europe, Asia, and the Americas, civilians lined up to donate blood, to carry supplies, to fight with whatever weapons they could find. The Vorrakai didn't understand. To them, compassion was weakness, and sacrifice was foolishness. They could not comprehend why humans would risk their lives for strangers, why they would fight battles they couldn't win. Madness. General Morvac spat when he saw reports of humans charging Vorrakai landing parties with nothing but rifles and Molotov cocktails. "They throw themselves at us like animals." Krethar studied the feeds carefully. Cities reduced to rubble. Villages burned. Yet the humans kept fighting. Children carrying water to soldiers. Old men and women digging trenches. Engineers turning factory lines into weapons production. "They are stubborn," Krethar admitted. His claws tapped against the console. Too stubborn. It will cost them dearly. The first victory. The Vorrakai landed their first major ground assault in Eastern Europe, where open plains would allow their war machines to advance unhindered. Massive armored walkers, bristling with plasma cannons, marched across the fields, supported by swarms of aerial drones. Human armies met them with tanks, artillery, and aircraft. Against the Vorrakai's superior technology, it was a slaughter. Metal melted. Tanks crumbled. Jets fell from the skies. Entire battalions were reduced to ash within hours. But the humans did not retreat. They adapted. A group of engineers, working in the ruins of a destroyed factory, cobbled together a weapon from scavenged Vorrakai parts and human electronics. Crude, unstable, but effective. A makeshift electromagnetic pulse cannon. Hidden beneath camouflage nets, they waited until the Vorrakai walkers drew close. The pulse fired. Vorrakai machines convulsed, their circuits fried. One, then two, then three walkers toppled like giants brought low. Human artillery rained down, smashing the disabled machines. Soldiers swarmed the wreckage, prying out weapons, salvaging armor, repurposing alien tech against its makers. The Vorrakai had expected a broken, helpless prey. Instead, they saw a predator that learned with terrifying speed. The broadcast. On the fifth day, humanity struck back, not with weapons but with words. Across hacked Vorrakai channels, a human face appeared, a young woman, dirty, exhausted, her voice hoarse but steady. You think we are weak. You think because we bleed, because we fall, that we will surrender. But you are wrong. Every drop of blood you spill feeds the fire inside us. Every city you burn only strengthens our resolve. You may have the skies. You may have the machines. But this is our home. And we will never stop fighting. The Vorrakai crews listened in silence. To them, it was laughable bravado. Yet some felt an unfamiliar chill. Because the look in her eyes was not fear. It was defiance. And defiance was dangerous. The hidden strength. What the Vorrakai never considered was the depth of humanity's will to endure. They saw a fragile species of flesh and bone, but they didn't see the history behind that fragility. They didn't know of the Ice Ages, where humans survived with nothing but fire and grit. They didn't know of wars where outnumbered armies fought until the last man. They didn't know of explorers who sailed into unknown seas, of climbers who scaled impossible peaks, of survivors who rebuilt from ashes again and again. The Vorrakai had never faced a species that thrived on adversity. For humanity, pain was not the end. It was the beginning. And the Vorrakai were about to learn that lesson, one battle at a time. The Vorrakai invasion should have ended within days. By every calculation, by every precedent in their long history of conquest, humanity should have crumbled. The Vorrakai had superior firepower, unstoppable fleets, and technology centuries ahead of Earth's. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems. And yet, 5 days into the campaign, humanity still fought. It wasn't the kind of fight the Vorrakai expected. Armies clashed, yes, but when armies broke, the humans didn't stop. Instead, they vanished into forests, into ruined cities, into underground tunnels. They fought with rifles, knives, even bare hands when necessary. Every road became a trap, every building a fortress, every shadow a danger. For the first time in generations, the Vorrakai found themselves dragged into a kind of war they despised, a war of attrition. Guerrilla fire. In the shattered remains of Warsaw, Vorrakai patrols stalked the streets, hunting for survivors. Their scanners picked up faint heat signatures in the ruins, but every time they advanced, hidden explosives tore apart their ranks. Snipers struck from rooftops, then vanished through holes blasted in walls. Children ran messages through the sewers. Old women carried supplies beneath cloaks. Farmers converted tractors into armored carriers. Engineers rewired Vorrakai drones to serve as spies. The Vorrakai called it dishonorable. They expected open battle, strength against strength. Instead, they faced a species that refused to play by the rules. Cowards, General Morvac spat after losing another patrol to hidden mines. They skulk and hide. They do not fight like warriors. But Krethar, watching the reports, felt a slow unease. No, he murmured. They fight like survivors. And survivors are the most dangerous prey. The first hybrid weapons. In an abandoned subway beneath Berlin, a group of human engineers worked tirelessly under flickering lanterns. They had scavenged parts from downed Vorrakai drones, their circuits still sparking faintly. Combined with human wiring, batteries, and sheer ingenuity, the engineers had created something new. The weapon was ugly. Wires jutted from its sides, its casing was patchwork steel, and it hummed with unstable energy. But when they tested it on a Vorrakai drone, the blast of raw plasma tore the machine in half. The humans cheered. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Within weeks, resistance groups across the world began producing hybrid weapons, human creativity fused with alien technology. Plasma rifles powered by car batteries. Explosives laced with Vorrakai fuel cells. Shields cobbled from scavenged armor plating. The Vorrakai expected broken weapons and primitive bombs. What they got instead were tools of war that turned their own power against them. One Vorrakai officer, upon seeing human soldiers fire scavenged plasma rifles, snarled in disbelief. They should not be able to use our technology. But humans could, and did, because they refused to believe in the word impossible. The Battle of the Black Forest. The Vorrakai advanced into Germany with a massive ground force, intending to crush the growing resistance. Thousands of soldiers, supported by walkers and drones, pushed into the Black Forest. They expected an easy campaign against scattered guerrillas. Instead, the forest became a graveyard. Every trail was booby-trapped. Trees were rigged with explosives. Walkers stumbled into pits hidden beneath foliage. Vorrakai soldiers found themselves snared in nets, bombarded with arrows tipped with scavenged plasma shards. When Vorrakai units tried to regroup, the forest erupted with gunfire and plasma bolts from unseen enemies. Resistance fighters struck, disappeared, then struck again. The Vorrakai war machines, designed for open battle, struggled in the dense woods. Drones were snatched from the air by nets. Walkers toppled in ambushes, and Vorrakai squads found themselves hunted by enemies they could not see. The battle lasted for weeks. In the end, the Vorrakai withdrew, leaving behind smoldering wreckage and thousands of dead. For the first time, humanity had forced the Empire to retreat. The world erupted with hope. Alien perception. In the War Council aboard the Blood Fang, Krethar studied the reports. His officers hissed in frustration. Losses were mounting. What should have been a swift conquest was dragging into a costly quagmire. "Explain to me," Krethar demanded, his voice low and dangerous, "why this primitive species bleeds us dry." A Vorrakai strategist bowed low. "They do not fight like others. They do not surrender when broken. They adapt. They improvise. They change." "Change?" Krethar repeated. "Yes, High Warlord. Within days they wield weapons of our design. Within weeks they resist with tactics we have never seen. No other species has done this. They fight with imagination." Imagination. It was a concept the Vorrakai despised. To them, discipline and order were strength. But now they faced an enemy who turned chaos into power. Krethar clenched his claws. "Then we will burn their world until nothing is left to imagine." But even as he said it, unease gnawed at him. The underground network. By the second month of the invasion, Earth's resistance had become more than scattered fighters. Across continents, a vast underground network emerged. Messages were carried through hacked signals, hidden couriers, and even coded songs sung in refugee camps. Cities in ruins became fortresses. Tunnels beneath mountains became bases. The oceans hid submarines that struck Vorrakai ships in sudden, devastating ambushes. In South America, jungles swallowed Vorrakai patrols whole. In Africa, nomadic tribes led alien soldiers into endless deserts where heat and thirst crippled them. In Asia, sprawling megacities became labyrinths of resistance, where every alley hid danger. Humanity had turned its greatest weakness, its diversity, into its greatest strength. Every culture, every language, every tradition added to the resistance. Each region fought in its own way, yet all fought for the same cause: survival. And the Vorrakai, for all their power, could not crush it. The message from Earth. One night, Vorrakai Command received an unauthorized transmission. It cut across every frequency, reaching every ship, every soldier. On the screen appeared not a general, not a leader, but an ordinary man, his clothes torn, his face bruised, his eyes burning with determination. You think we are divided? That we are weak because we are many, because we argue, because we are different. But that is what makes us strong. We are not one people. We are thousands, millions, billions. And every one of us will fight you, in every way, with everything we have. You may conquer cities. You may kill us by the millions. But you cannot kill what we are. We are humanity. We do not break. We endure. The transmission ended. Across the Vorrakai fleet, silence lingered. Soldiers, bred to see enemies as prey, felt an unfamiliar sensation: doubt. The Vorrakai's fear. Krethar stood alone at the viewport of the Blood Fang, staring down at Earth. Fires burned across its continents, scars of the invasion. By all rights, the humans should have been broken. And yet, in those flames, he saw something terrible. Not weakness, not submission, but a fire that refused to die. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Krethar wondered if he faced not prey, but predators cloaked in fragile skin. The Vorrakai Empire had never faced defeat. For centuries, their fleets had swept across worlds, crushing resistance in days. But on Earth, weeks had turned into months. Their supply lines strained. Their soldiers grew weary. And still, the humans fought. The galaxy would later call it the War of Defiance. The spark of unity. In the underground chambers of an abandoned subway in New York, leaders from across the globe gathered. They weren't politicians anymore. They were survivors, generals, engineers, doctors, even farmers who had risen to lead their people. For the first time in history, representatives of every nation sat together, not as rivals, but as humans. Maps were spread across dusty tables. Vorrakai fleet positions, troop deployments, supply drops, all gathered from hacked signals, scavenged tech, and desperate reconnaissance missions. "We cannot keep fighting alone," said General Alvarez, her voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "Our resistance is scattered. Every strike bleeds them, yes, but it also bleeds us. If we are to win, we must fight as one world." The room was silent. Then slowly heads nodded. Humanity had always been divided, by nations, by borders, by ideologies. But against an enemy that sought to erase them entirely, those divisions finally crumbled. That night, the Global Resistance Network was born. The Vorrakai Offensive. The Vorrakai, unaware of this newfound unity, launched their largest offensive yet. Entire fleets descended over Asia, intent on crushing the megacities that served as hubs for human resistance. Beijing burned. Delhi was bombarded. Tokyo shuddered under orbital fire. Vorrakai soldiers marched through ruins, expecting another easy victory. But instead of chaos, they met coordinated resistance. For the first time, resistance cells across the world moved in perfect synchronization. Attacks struck Vorrakai positions at once, stretching their forces thin. In the skies above India, human pilots, flying outdated jets patched together with scavenged alien tech, pulled off maneuvers Vorrakai drones couldn't predict. In the tunnels beneath Beijing, resistance fighters unleashed hybrid weapons that short-circuited alien armor. In Tokyo, skyscrapers became sniper nests, pouring fire down on Vorrakai patrols. The aliens took the cities, yes, but at a cost so high it rattled even their hardened commanders. The scientists' gambit. In a hidden laboratory beneath the Rockies, a team of scientists worked tirelessly on a weapon unlike anything humanity had wielded before. They called it Project Orion. At its core was stolen Vorrakai technology, an energy reactor meant to power starships. But human engineers had reconfigured it, feeding it with unstable fission materials scavenged from destroyed nuclear plants. The result was something terrifying, a bomb that could unleash devastation even the Vorrakai feared. Dr. Mei Lin, the lead scientist, stared at the glowing core. "This is madness," she whispered. Her assistant, a young man whose family had died in the first orbital strikes, shook his head. "No, doctor. This is survival. They want to erase us. We give them a reason to remember us instead." Word of Project Orion spread quietly through the resistance. It was dangerous, unstable, but it represented hope. A weapon that could shatter even the Vorrakai's strongest ships. The first major blow. The opportunity came in the skies above the Mediterranean. The Vorrakai flagship Iron Fang had descended into low orbit to oversee a ground campaign in Italy. Heavily armed, shielded, and guarded, it was considered untouchable. But the resistance had a plan. From hidden bases, submarines surfaced, launching modified missiles tipped with hybrid tech. From the ruins of coastal cities, anti-air cannons roared. Fighter jets, ancient, patched with alien components, took to the skies. The Iron Fang swatted them aside like gnats. Then came the real strike. A small resistance ship, built from scavenged parts and disguised as debris, drifted close to the Iron Fang. Inside, a team of volunteers armed Project Orion. They knew it was a one-way mission. As the Vorrakai scanned the object, alarms blared. By the time they realized it wasn't debris, it was too late. The sky erupted in white fire. The Iron Fang was torn in half, its mighty shields ripped apart by the unstable core of Project Orion. The explosion lit the night, visible for hundreds of miles. Resistance fighters on the ground cheered, tears streaming down their faces as the debris rained into the sea. For the first time in the war, a Vorrakai capital ship had fallen. The galaxy takes notice. Across the stars, distant species watched in disbelief. Reports of the human resistance spread through hidden channels, whispered in markets and slave camps under Vorrakai control. A species that should have died in days had destroyed a Vorrakai flagship. A species with Stone Age weapons compared to galactic empires was making the conquerors bleed. Whispers turned to hope. If humanity could resist, maybe others could too. The Vorrakai's rage. On the Blood Fang, Krethar's fury shook the ship. His claws gouged deep scars into the metal of his command chair. "A flagship destroyed," he roared. "By primitives." His officers quailed before his wrath, but Krethar's anger was laced with something darker. Fear. Never before had prey destroyed one of their ships. Never before had prey defied them so long. "This war drags us into the mud," he growled. "We bleed for every inch of their world. This is no victory, it is humiliation." But even in his rage, Krethar understood a terrible truth. The longer the war dragged on, the more it shifted against them. Vorrakai's supply lines stretched thin. Their fleets bogged down in endless skirmishes. And all the while, the humans only grew stronger, more united, more dangerous. He snarled, "We must break them before they break us." The turning point. The destruction of the Iron Fang ignited humanity like never before. Recruitment soared. Civilians who had hidden now took up arms. Hybrid weapons flowed through resistance lines. Cities rose in open rebellion, striking Vorrakai forces from within. In Africa, guerrillas launched raids that captured Vorrakai convoys whole. In Europe, resistance fighters ambushed alien columns with coordinated strikes. In South America, jungles became death traps. In North America, underground bunkers churned out weapons at a feverish pace. For the first time, humanity wasn't just surviving. It was winning. The Vorrakai's nightmare. Late one night, Krethar reviewed intercepted human transmissions. He expected desperation, fear. Instead, he found something far worse. Laughter.
Songs.
Speeches filled with fire and hope. Humans, even in the ruins of their cities, were not broken. They celebrated victories, mourned their dead, and then fought harder. In the Vorrakai language, there was no word for hope. It was a concept they had long discarded. But as Krethar listened to the humans speak, he realized he was hearing it. And it terrified him. The destruction of the Vorrakai flagship Iron Fang sent shockwaves through the empire. Never before had a prey species struck such a blow. Across conquered worlds, whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, the Vorrakai were no longer feared as invincible gods of war, but as conquerors who could bleed. On Earth, the explosion above the Mediterranean lit more than the sky. It lit a fire in the hearts of billions. A world transformed. By the third month of the invasion, Earth was unrecognizable. Entire cities lay in ruins. Nations had crumbled into rubble. Yet amid the devastation, something extraordinary had risen. A united humanity. Factories that once built cars now churned out hybrid rifles. Shipyards once destined for trade vessels now forged crude spacefaring craft armored with scavenged Vorrakai plating. Laboratories, hidden deep beneath mountains, became centers of wild, desperate innovation. Everywhere humans were inventing, adapting, creating weapons and machines no Vorrakai strategist could have imagined. The first human fleet. It began with a single ship. The Defiance was little more than a gutted cargo hauler reinforced with steel and patched with scavenged alien armor. Its engines were outdated, its hull ugly, its weapons cobbled together from stolen plasma cannons. But when the Defiance launched from a hidden base in South America, the world watched in awe. Humanity had built its first true warship. Others followed. Crude, unstable, patched with whatever scraps could be found, but they flew. Within weeks, Earth had a fleet, not of sleek cruisers like the Vorrakai, but of ironclad monsters born from desperation and ingenuity. The Resistance had become an armada. The strike into orbit. The Vorrakai maintained heavy orbital control, their ships circling Earth like vultures. For months, humanity had fought under their shadow. Now, for the first time, the Resistance prepared to strike upward. The plan was bold, reckless, human to its core. The new fleet would launch simultaneously from hidden bases across the globe, swarming the nearest Vorrakai carrier group. They could not win in numbers, but they would win in ferocity. As the hour approached, Resistance leaders broadcast a single message across the planet. Tonight, humanity reaches the stars. Tonight, we show them Earth does not belong to conquerors. It belongs to us. When the fleet launched, the night skies blazed with fire. Engines roared as the ragtag armada surged upward, breaking through the atmosphere into the cold silence of space. The Vorrakai, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. Warships moved to intercept, confident they would crush the primitive fleet. They were wrong. The battle of low orbit. The clash was chaos. Vorrakai's ships fired plasma lances that vaporized human craft in flashes of light. But the humans didn't retreat. They charged. The Defiance rammed a Vorrakai frigate head-on, detonating its core in a blinding explosion. Human ships moved in close, weaving through the enemy's formations, where their plasma lances were harder to bring to bear. Crude missiles launched from retrofitted tubes tore through Vorrakai shields. Resistance pilots, flying vessels that should barely have left the atmosphere, pulled off maneuvers no alien had ever attempted. They sacrificed themselves willingly, slamming crippled ships into enemy cruisers, detonating scavenged warheads at point-blank range. The Vorrakai commander of the orbital fleet snarled as his sensors reported impossible losses. They throw away their lives. They are insane, but that insanity was strategy. For every human ship destroyed, a Vorrakai vessel fell with it. The balance shifted. By the end of the battle, orbit was littered with wreckage. Human ships limped back to Earth, battered but victorious. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth's skies were clear of Vorrakai dominance. The world erupted in celebration. Humanity had not just defended its home. It had taken the fight into the stars. Rebellion but rivals. Humanity's next step. On Earth, the Resistance was no longer content with survival. Leaders of once fractured nations now stood together in secret bunkers, united under a single banner: Humanity Ascendant. Dr. Leila Navarro, the chief scientist behind the Skyhammer project, unveiled their next miracle, the Ark class. The Ark class wasn't a warship. It was something far more ambitious. A fusion of human engineering and scavenged Vorrakai tech. It was the first true deep space vessel humanity had ever built, capable not just of reaching orbit, but of crossing the void between stars. The plan was audacious. Send the arcs to nearby rebel worlds, carrying not soldiers, but hope. Supplies. Weapons. The knowledge that Earth had fought back and won. The Vorrakai fought with fleets and fire. Humanity would fight with fire, yes, but also with ideas. With inspiration. With the spark that had driven them through millennia of struggle. The belief that the impossible could be done. The Vorrakai counterstroke. But the Empire was not idle. When the first Arc-class vessel, the Liberty, launched from its hidden cradle in the Andes, Vorrakai scouts detected it. A fleet was dispatched to intercept. The ambush was brutal. The Vorrakai descended on the Liberty with overwhelming force. Its escorts, cobbled together resistance warships, were torn apart. But humanity had anticipated betrayal. As the Vorrakai fleet closed in, hidden resistance stations in orbit powered up. Dozens of experimental weapons, crude railguns, and jury-rigged plasma throwers opened fire in unison. The battle turned into a slaughter. The Liberty escaped through the chaos, vanishing into the void beyond Earth. Humanity had not only defended itself again, it had escaped the cage of its own solar system. The ripple effect. When the Liberty arrived at Karath, the miners who had risen against the Vorrakai wept. Not because they had freed themselves, but because another species had crossed the stars to stand beside them. Gifts were exchanged, crude human rifles, food, medicine. But what mattered most was the message the humans brought. You are not alone. We fight with you. That message spread like lightning. Across the Empire, slaves began to believe in something they had not dared for centuries. Victory. The Vorrakai's breaking point. Reports flooded the Vorrakai council chambers. A fleet ambushed near the rim, destroyed by guerrilla fighters. A fortress world overrun by its own conscripts. Entire sectors refusing to send tribute. And always, behind the chaos, one name whispered like a curse. Humanity. The Vorrakai Empire, once untouchable, was bleeding from within. High Warlord Krethar stared at the star maps, claw tracing over systems now marked with rebellion. His empire was shrinking. The prey had become predators, and the galaxy had noticed. He turned to his generals, voice low and grim. If Earth is not destroyed soon, then we are finished. They are not a world. They are a spark. And sparks burn forests. The predator's mask falls. Back on Earth, resistance leaders debated their next move. Some argued for defense, protecting their homeworld above all else. Others demanded offense, strike at the Vorrakai throne world, end the war before the Empire could recover. Captain Elias Ward, now one of humanity's most celebrated commanders, spoke words that would echo for centuries. We are no longer fighting for Earth. We are fighting for every world that has ever known chains. If we stop now, the Vorrakai will return stronger. If we push forward, the galaxy will be free. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, humanity realized it was no longer merely resisting invasion. It was leading a revolution that spanned the stars. The galaxy watches. In hidden corners of the cosmos, alien races, long thought broken, began to stir. On the ice world of Drannith, hunters raised weapons they had buried in despair. On the shattered moons of Vera, exiles began to gather fleets of stolen ships. On distant, forgotten colonies, banners of rebellion rose. And above it all, Vorrakai fleets burned, unable to stamp out the rising tide. Humanity had shattered the galaxy's balance. What began as a desperate defense of Earth had become something far greater, the downfall of an empire. The calm before the storm. But Krethar was not finished. Deep within Vorrakai space, he summoned the Empire's most ancient and terrible weapon, something used only once in recorded history, when the Vorrakai annihilated an enemy homeworld to ash. As rebellion spread, as human arcs carried hope to distant stars, as the Empire trembled on the edge of collapse, Krethar prepared his final card. He would not just conquer Earth. He would erase it. The weapon of legends. The Vorrakai Empire had always whispered of it in secret. A weapon so terrible, so final it had been locked away for millennia. The Star's Heart. Forged in the Empire's earliest wars, the Star's Heart was not a ship, nor a fleet. It was a living engine of destruction, a moon-sized construct orbiting deep within Vorrakai space. At its heart burned an artificial singularity, bound in chains of exotic matter. It could crack planets, boil seas, and shatter civilizations with a single strike. The Vorrakai had used it only once, to erase a rival empire from history. Since then, it had slept in the shadows, a reminder that no world could stand against Vorrakai might. Now, with rebellions spreading and Earth refusing to kneel, High Warlord Krethar gave the order that no ruler had dared before. Awaken the Star's Heart. Aim it at Earth. The galaxy trembles. Word of the weapon's activation spread quickly. Vorrakai propagandists broadcast across conquered systems. Behold the fate of Earth. This is the price of rebellion. You are not humans. Do not share their fate. But instead of fear, something else rose. On slave worlds, whispers hardened into rage. On frontier systems, hidden ships rallied into fleets. And across the stars, countless eyes turned toward Earth, not in pity, but in solidarity. If the Vorrakai erased Earth, they would not just kill a species. They would kill hope itself. On Earth, when resistance leaders learned of the Star's Heart, silence fell across the War Council. The holo display showed the weapon, vast as a world, drifting through space like a black wound. Dr. Layla Navarro's voice cracked as she spoke. No shield can withstand it. No fleet can stop it. If it fires, Earth is gone. For the first time since the invasion began, despair gripped even the bravest. Billions prepared for annihilation. Families dug bunkers that would never save them. Soldiers sharpened blades they would never swing. Children asked parents if the stars would fall. But in the midst of the despair, Captain Elias Ward stood. His voice carried the steel of humanity's defiance. Then we don't wait for it to fire. We take the fight to it. The impossible plan. The Resistance's new goal was madness itself. Destroy the Star's Heart before it reached firing range. To do it, they would throw everything they had, every warship, every ark, every experimental weapon Earth had built in secret. It would be a battle not of survival, but of sacrifice. The plan was codenamed Operation Dawnfire. It would be humanity's first true interstellar warfront. And perhaps their last. The fleet assembles. From hidden bases across Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt, the Resistance gathered its fleet. Hundreds of ships, ugly, patchwork vessels cobbled from steel, scavenged alien parts, and sheer defiance. They were outnumbered 10-1 by the Vorrakai armada escorting the Star's Heart. But they had no choice. When the fleet launched, the skies of Earth burned with fire once more. Billions watched as their defenders left home, some never to return. Children in the ruins of New York painted the names of ships on broken walls. Farmers in Africa prayed for pilots they would never meet. In the bunkers of Asia, songs rose, songs of defiance, of fury, of hope. Humanity had never been so united. The Battle of the Star's Heart. The void between Earth and the Vorrakai weapon became a graveyard of fire. The first clash was merciless. Vorrakai warships swept into the human fleet with disciplined precision, their plasma lances ripping through crude human hulls. Entire wings of resistance ships vanished in burning silence. But humanity struck back with madness. Pilots rammed ships into enemy cruisers, detonating nuclear cores in blinding bursts. Arcs carried swarms of drop pods that tore Vorrakai vessels apart from the inside. The Skyhammer itself, retrofitted into a mobile rail platform, fired tungsten rods across space, piercing battleships like spears through flesh. Still, the Vorrakai numbers were overwhelming. Wave after wave pushed humanity back, forcing the Resistance fleet into desperation. At the heart of it all, the Star's Heart loomed, silent, patient, unstoppable. The infiltration. Realizing brute force would never destroy the Star's Heart, Captain Ward proposed the unthinkable, an infiltration. A small team of human commandos, carried aboard the Defiance, would penetrate the weapon's hull, sabotage its core, and detonate it from within. It was a suicide mission. Every soul aboard the Defiance knew it. And yet, when Ward asked for volunteers, every hand rose. If Earth must burn, one soldier said, let it burn with us fighting inside the beast's heart. Inside the beast. The Defiance plunged through the chaos of battle, its hull battered, engines screaming. With covering fire from the fleet, it smashed into the star shard's surface, gouging a wound into its blackened shell. Ward and his team charged into the abyss. Inside, the star's heart was a nightmare of alien machinery. Vast conduits pulsed with the glow of the singularity at its heart. Vorrakai guardians swarmed, but the humans moved like ghosts, cutting through the labyrinth with fury and desperation. They reached the core chamber, and there it was, a sphere of contained darkness, writhing like a caged star, bound by impossible energies. The weapon that could end Earth. Dr. Navarro's voice came through the comms, trembling with awe. If you destabilize it, the explosion will consume the entire star's heart. Maybe half the fleet around it. Maybe, Ward asked, grimly smiling. Navarro hesitated. Or, it might ignite a chain reaction that tears open space itself. Ward laughed. Then let's roll the dice. The sacrifice. The team planted charges across the containment field, setting them to overload. Vorrakai forces poured into the chamber, claws and plasma tearing through human flesh. One by one, the commandos fell, buying seconds for the rest. Ward was the last. Wounded, armor shattered, he stood before the singularity with the detonator in hand. He thought of Earth, of the children painting ships' names on ruined walls, of the songs rising in bunkers, of the hope that had carried humanity this far. He whispered, not to his enemies, but to the stars themselves, this is for all of us. And he pressed the switch. The shattering. The star's heart screamed. Its core convulsed, containment fields collapsing. Light brighter than suns erupted as the artificial singularity tore itself apart. The explosion consumed the weapon in seconds, ripping apart Vorrakai's ships caught in its blast. The shockwaves spread across the void, shredding fleets, scattering wreckage, and bathing the stars in fire. Human ships, battered and broken, fled at maximum burn. Half never escaped. But when the light faded, the star's heart was gone. The Vorrakai's ultimate weapon had been destroyed by human hands. The cost. Silence filled the comms as the survivors regrouped. Hundreds of ships had launched. Barely a fraction remained. Captain Ward and his team were gone, consumed in the explosion. The Defiance was nothing but ash. But Earth still lived. The star's heart was no more. When the survivors limped home, the world erupted. Bells rang across ruined cities. Fires were lit on mountaintops. For the first time in history, humanity celebrated not just survival, but victory against annihilation itself. Ward's name became legend. Songs were written of the Defiance. Children swore oaths to never forget the night humanity shattered a god. The Vorrakai reaction. On the throne world, Krethar received the news in silence. His claws dug so deep into the armrest of his throne that the obsidian cracked. The star's heart was gone. His fleets were shattered. And Earth still defied him. For the first time in Vorrakai history, a high warlord whispered words of despair. We cannot win. The dawn of something greater. But on Earth, leaders spoke different words. Dr. Navarro addressed the survivors from a battered bunker, her voice broadcast across the world and, secretly, to rebel colonies beyond. We are no longer prey. We are no longer alone. We are the fire in the dark, and we will not stop until the galaxy is free. And across the stars, countless voices rose in answer. The Vorrakai Empire had played its last card. Humanity had survived. But survival was no longer enough. The time had come not just to defend Earth. The time had come to end the Vorrakai Empire. The Vorrakai Empire was dust. Worlds once chained now sang with freedom. Skies once dark with war now glittered with hope. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy belonged not to tyrants, but to the free. And at the heart of it all stood humanity. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as proof that even the smallest flame can set the stars ablaze. Generations later, children would ask, how did it begin? And the answer would always be the same. It began with prey that refused to bow. It began with mortals who dared to strike at gods. It began with Earth. For when the galaxy thought humanity weak, humanity showed its greatest truth. They do not break. They endure. They rise. And long after empires crumble, long after stars themselves burn out, the story will remain. Humans were here, and they changed everything.